Hi Gayathri. Good afternoon.
Hey, Kiran, good afternoon.
Hailing from Bombay. What about you in Bangalore?
Yes, yeah, Bangalore, all good. I don't think I've seen much of Bangalore in the last 5 months, so I
Yeah,
could be anywhere.
right. I mean, COVID has made it that way that like people can work from anywhere. And how is that remote work environment working for you guys?
I think I think we have passed the stage of, oh my God, this is not going to work, to a point where, we still live in a bit of a blur between work and home. And But I guess there are some positives on the non-travel, to the point that I heard people even miss the travel, especially the Bangalore traffic. I heard in one of my team meetings, somebody said, I wish we could go in a cab. And I was like, that is not a wish that you should have. But jokes aside, I guess uh, remote management is definitely a test in leadership, especially when you're inheriting new teams or you're making changes. It's a hard one. I guess all through. And the second is, my heart goes out to all the new college graduates who've joined this year. um, it's my view that I can always raise my hand and say, some of the best code I wrote as a new joinee was, or even later, is ones that I copied. Right? I think there's no such thing as originality, and you don't have that connect is sets them back. So I constantly try to keep in touch to say, it's not you that who doesn't know. It's just that everybody doesn't know, and we're just stronger collectively. And it's hard to do it new, especially when you're new, just out of college and need that help. So
I love these points because two things. First is to introduce the audience to who you are. So everyone, this is Gayathri. Gayathri works with Intuit and she's the director of engineering. And she's been in working with technologies, I think, for a good decade and a half, although she looks quite young for the experience. When did you start coding?
no, it's it's more than 2 decades actually.
Two
So
decades.
so I actually joke saying that when I had 5 years experience, I would have said 5 years and 2 months.
Right.
And now that I have well over 20 years, I say well over 20 years than the actual specific date.
Wow.
But I started coding when when Java was just born. So that's old, how old I am. And I have my own journey has and yes, I right now what I do is I director of development for identity platforms within Intuit India. Maybe I can quickly introduce Intuit in that context. I know Intuit is, I think most of you would know it as a TurboTax or QuickBooks products, which essentially we cater for small business, self-employed, and people like you and me who pay taxes. Unfortunately, TurboTax is in the US, but the rest of the products are worldwide. Um, the mission statement we have is, powering prosperity around the world. So that's essentially what we try to do. Root for those who want to dream and do things for themselves. And My role is I am in product development. I lead identity out of India. And so essentially all the cross-cutting capabilities of authorization, sign-on, single sign-on and stuff like that, which is stuff that you see behind the scenes that happens magically, is all the stuff that happens out of my team. And About my own journey is, I have my foundations in pretty much started with security. I did a lot of identity and access management for financial industry for the first, I think, probably like 12 years of my life. And then I switched to, working on APIs and frameworks as a core platform development for mostly, enterprise applications. And I tenured with SAP during that period. And now my focus is, continues to be in application foundations in Intuit. I think there is definitely a pattern there. The stuff that I try to build or do is stuff that I can never explain to my family. But however, what brings me joy is that how do you build the right tech? and simple and robust solutions. So I think that's been my passion through.
Let's pause here for a moment. I feel being a non-techie, it's a bit overwhelming. I'm going to lay it out as a layman, what I heard you say. So you
Yes.
mentioned that you were working with enterprise-based solutions. Identity is basically my identity when I join with regards to my financial transactions that happen. And how that's tech-enabled is someone, you're one of the people on the back end who's actually led this product to be discovered. Very great. I would love for us to take a bit of latitude on our topic today, which is platforms and APIs. And today's session is about raising insights from someone who is on like leading the tech backbone of one of the larger MNCs that have come out of this country. So help me gather insights. How do an entrepreneur, how does an entrepreneur leverage tech? When does an entrepreneur approach, and especially the mindset and the word platform? I think we should start with the very basics. What's the platform, and how do we, how does an entrepreneur leverage these platforms? What's your vantage on this?
Um, Yeah, I think that's a good place to start, and I would love to keep this more relatable to everybody, so that it's not going to be tech jargons, but mostly derives from the experiences that I've had. So some of these might be opinions, so just go with that. So when do you actually start? I think we start in this day and age. I think we start using platforms the moment you sign up for an Amazon account on AWS, right? Most of us don't run our own data centers. Most of the entrepreneurs themselves don't run data centers. They use compute. Um, but just to slice that question, what is a platform, right? I think a platform is nothing but a group of technologies that which other applications or other products are developed on, right? So the short answer is that it depends on your business model. So if you're an entrepreneur whose business product itself is a platform, and give me an example that giving an example is you're building an Uber, you're building a marketplace where it's purely people come in to exchange value. Then you're going to start by thinking about platform, because your day one is to figure out how do you create a platform for others. So you're going to start thinking about foundation, about what is the best way to people to come and interact and exchange. So you start to think about middleware, you start to think about broker services. So you start foundationally thinking about platforms. And then there are the rest of us who think about um, uh, a product or a service. Like you're building a product which has some functionality, you have a target audience, you have a customer who has a need, and you're going and solving that. So it's a specificity in its, it's bounded in its context of what it's trying to solve. In that case, you start your day one choices are probably infrastructure and compute. You start at that, but you don't really think about platform at that point, because it's natural to think about to build everything contained within itself. Right? You just think, okay, I have a product, and therefore all my data, all my behavior of what that product does will just be wrapped into a single module or an application, and I'm just going to run that, and that's perfectly fine, because you don't want to force a platform conversation on the day one, because at this point you're still testing waters on the idea and the effectiveness of your product. You're still finding your customers, or maybe you have some beta customers that you've started looking at, and you're fine tuning your solution, which is the actual value prop, which means the core of your product itself hasn't shaped up. So you don't need to worry about context, because that's it's too early. um, but then you start, you suddenly get into a stage where you've tested your beta customers. There is money in the bank. You start to see that I need to expand either horizontally in terms of functionality, or I want to give this to more number of people. So you then get into the good side of problem is how do I scale? And I think that's when you start thinking about problem. That's when you start thinking about how do I build it as a platform? And I can touch upon what that means when I talk about that. Yeah.
Sure. I'd take a slight horizontal look at what is the platform doing, like when it comes to processes that are being automated or engagements between the users at both ends being developed. If at that fundamental level, processes, good processes, bad processes, iterations, how does a challenge appear to you in a very general setting? How do you approach it when it comes to objectives and goals?
Yeah, so I think when we start, at the point where, when you start worrying about, separation of core and context, as I talked about, is when you start to scale. So your objective is that what is the core product doing and what is the context it needs to do what it's doing. Meaning you have like what we call in tech, you call it as your business logic. So that's the ultimate service that your product is providing. And that's finite. And then that keeps growing based on your testing and feedback. But then you have things like I need this to be manageable. I need this to be secure. I need this to be persistent and reliable. So these are contexts that are around the product, which are not necessarily have anything to do with how valuable your product is, but they are required for you to run in a durable manner. So those are that's when you start to slice and say, I need to separate these two because if I mix them, then you are bearing down from a concern perspective, you're bearing down on the. Let's talk a little bit about the organization as well, right? You're bearing down the team to think about both aspects, and that might not be the right way to go about it. So you might want to say, okay, I want to outsource some of the contexts. Which, when I say outsource, it's not to a different place, but you sort of start thinking about them differently. So these contexts can be started to build in a more durable way that's essential to your scaling. So, and as you called out, what are the processes or what are the objectives that you go after is one of the key things is how do I scale? How do I extend it? How do I customize it? Maybe you want to go global, right? You start to go one particular region and then you say I want to go global, and then there is an automatic variability that starts to come into play. So are you designed for that? Are you designed to go global very quickly? How can you build that kind of strategy that doesn't weigh your team down? That everything is not just hard to write, but everything is hard to manage. So I think when your good problems of customer and scale start to happen to you, I think you start realizing that um, there is more to the product than the core of it. I need to give it a stronger context.
Mm, from a startup journey perspective, I think like there's a lot of things that kind of come back to haunt founders, like things that you wish that you had known earlier. So if you had to share with young or early stage entrepreneurs, technical, non-technical, in terms of certain logics or like certain caveats
Mhm.
that you would thumb rules or principles. So this particular insight is meant for entrepreneurs just starting up. How much should they try to learn or emulate from platforms or corporates or larger industry players, and how much should they try to figure it out as they go along?
I think definitely every journey is unique in itself, but then you have enough design patterns or you have enough patterns in the industry to learn from. So your specific question was, how do you make sure that, or what are the things that I should not miss? Um, what do you not want to miss is always think about how you while you have your eye on the today, like today I need to run this by a good investor, I need to run this with these three beta customers, is a today problem. Just envision what happens, what is a possibility 3 years from now. From that perspective, that's when you because what seems most intuitive today, which fit everything together in a single bundle without contracts or durability the product doesn't integrate, it's not modular, it's all just clunky, but it's small, it's tiny, because today you just started. This will hurt in the longer run because when you grow and scale, if you have a bespoke implementation, um, you essentially will run into the problem of tribal knowledge, right? So the product grows in the tribal knowledge as opposed to separation through contracts. So, which essentially means 5 engineers know what the product does, and those 5 engineers are the only ones who can go and change things. And then those 5 engineers are needed when you have to scale it. So, how do you not get into that mode of building on tribal knowledge versus durable contracts? Then starts to hurt you because you can no longer manage it or extend it without people. You essentially you will have to make it durable only as a separate effort. So don't write something to begin with as a piece that doesn't have that modularity. Start thinking, even if you're not building a big platform, try to make the code modular, try to make it integratable, but don't fall for that. I'm building a generic thing. Don't do that. That doesn't, it's like all the way to the, right or left, right? Don't, you need to stay somewhere in the center that you don't need to separate organizations. You don't need to separate teams. You don't need to create abstractions from the beginning, but make sure that you're writing reusable um, Lego foundation blocks that can be put together and removed. If your tech is focused on that, then your tech can scale. I think that's the one thing I would say.
Perfect. That actually helped me visualize. The Lego reference is something that I've heard tech entrepreneurs use a lot, and thank you for sharing that. In terms of mindset of the team that you had touched upon right now briefly, that like the culture of the organization also is a big component. So, would you like to expand a bit on that?
Sure, definitely. And I think this might, to make it relatable to startups, right? Startups aren't large teams. And I think startups are intimate, small teams of people who are passionate about something and they're bringing something to life. And as you scale, or even if you grow that, the hardest thing, and I've been in many startups and I've also worked in big organizations, is to retain that intimacy. Right? How do you become a big organization who still has that trust and equation with as a small team is the hard one to do. And so when you start to think platforms, don't think about large teams with friction and interdependencies, right? It just means that you have created modular and durable contracts that people don't need to depend on people. They just things work with or without having interactions between the individuals on a normal basis. So you can onboard new teams. You can probably bring in partners to do your work without having to spend months just onboarding them. So that's essentially what it means by creating those building blocks. It's not to separate that, okay, block A owned by X and Y and Z. So it's not to create those, don't create organizational boundaries. You can still have those blocks and you can still have autonomous teams who are able to create products, but at the same time, go for, if these are continuing the analogy on Lego blocks, these are robust blocks that outside in, the shape, how it fits with another thing, and also make it so that someone else can come and contribute to it. So it's not just a black box, but it's a reasonably transparent to teams for to an extent to come and contribute to it. So that way teams are autonomous in and also empowered. So they can go about making changes to their individual blocks. They can suggest changes and also make changes to other people's blocks, and everybody knows how to put them together. So the mindset there is boundaryless and autonomy and empowerment. So if you mix this, then you have sort of unleashed your engineers on a very nurturing environment where They're not going to come and complain, you know what, I need these 5 API changes, and I don't not getting it from this team or getting from that team, because that's not what you want to vision like 10 years down the line, that you have all these teams who are fighting amongst themselves on I'm blocked and I'm dependent. So while you're creating these durable contracts and blocks, make sure that uh, from the get-go, keep an open and boundaryless organization. Easier said than done, but I think if the culture starts from the beginning, it's much easier than infusing it later.
Right. So I heard you say, like in more relatable terms, the transparency of your task is something that is quite vital, and also where it comes to ownership of that, it's something that everyone is geared towards the organizational goal or the product's goal.
Yes.
So in that way, the invitation is for people to come and partake at the designated task, and also help in terms of being able to be nimble and navigate. If someone is caught up in a work stream heading in one direction, then you have the ability to keep moving forward. That's very interesting insights. Thank you for sharing. Um, if you had to go about building a platform, you also have to understand that, like, maybe somewhere the startup needs to pivot. So in those situations, what are some of those, I guess, alarming situations that you do end up finding yourself once in a while when organizational direction shifts? What are the conflicts that could be something to look at, maybe early on, maybe too early on, to
Yes, and I think this is I would this is more this is agnostic of tech, and I guess that's any kind of change that happens, and it could be pivots in your idea, it could be pivots in team structure or how you work, or what kind of culture you want to build.
or
Um,
COVID.
Right,
Uh,
exactly. So I think any change, right? I think the hardest thing for people to process is the change itself. And when people don't have, and I have been through many transformations myself, and I've been through different either reorgs or change in structures or culture, and pivots and ideas. Um, One of these very, very easy things to spot is when people are uncomfortable, they would say there is no clarity. And that's how it manifests as to, so what you want to bring is clarity. What you want to, as a person who's leading, if you're a startup founder and you're pivoting, it's your responsibility. It's not consensus, it's not to seek consensus, it's not a community driven thing. So don't get me wrong that you're seeking consensus from everybody as to what need to do, but you need to be able to directionally give why, and the what. The how is people will figure it out. They will help you figure it out. But if you are able to give directionally why you're changing, what you're changing, and what is the broader vision towards which we're going, then teams rally behind you. Even if they don't agree, even if there is a disagreement and commit mode, right? You still will see that, yeah, that makes sense. And here's my reasoning, right? I think that transparency is important, and it has to trickle down. Like, I don't know how the size is, but it cannot be, you obviously start and you radiate that to larger groups of individuals. You start with your core team, and then you radiate to a broader organization, but you need to take that time to communicate it and articulate it. And in those discussions, words matter, right? It's not about saying blah blah and then just moving on. I think the words actually matter at that time, because it needs to inspire confidence. Because as all of us know, right, it's a privilege to have people work with you. It's not that they need to work with you. So how do you ensure that people continue to work with you, is on the leader. And I think the leader needs to take the accountability to make things clear, and constantly seek feedback on clarity and purpose. If these are, if there is no clarity on purpose, or the why, then you will start seeing people getting disengaged, or you'll have essentially, feedback saying, what things are not clear and I don't know what we're supposed to do.
So generally, I think users signal with through feedback that these are certain changes or these are bugs or these are features that they like. And how do you kind of like when it's a large product and there are like thousands of customers out there, do you make features based on your assumptions or do you ask enough feedback? How do you take this as a tactic to move forward?
So there, I guess there are like we sort of do bottom up and top down kind of innovations. Like, I think very famously said, if you ask somebody what they want, they will tell you, I want a faster horse. They will never say, I want a car, right? So the big changes or makeovers are typically instincts or inputs coming from, probably less than 5% of your organization saying, I think there is a vision. I think this is what customers want. And then you go, and once there is a hypothesis based on an industry trend or an instinct based on the data that we are reading about the usage, that you go and say, okay, I think this is what I would want to go and solve. And once you put that out there, the process is straightforward. Then you essentially read beacons and you read signals, you experiment, you do A/B testing, you find control groups, you do beta customer testing. So you have different mechanics to understand what are people telling you. Is it an outright no, or it's a, you go to your, obviously you will definitely go to your advisory board and play that against with them. And you also test groups and you also will put your betas. So thankfully, with so much of sophistication in experimentation platforms, it's quite easy for us to go and do this. And there are very proven patterns in terms of data analytics, as well as experimentation methodologies that allow us to all do the same that the Googles or the Facebooks do every day. So I think entrepreneurs have that. The second one is bottom up, where you are putting your ear to the ground, you are listening to feedback, either the voice of the customer through the product or through your email channels. You need to give them an opportunity to say whatever they want to say, and then you have to keep listening to that, and distilling out what is the theme that is coming out of it. There may be drip changes. Those are drip changes, but those are things that we didn't think of. They are deltas. You once in a while you'll find like a aha from that, but you'll always find drip changes through that particular stream. So with these two mechanics of top down and bottom up, you reach a place where you're constantly listening to feedback, and at the same time you're pushing some bold ideas to your customers.
Sure. So, as we are part of the series of startup circles, and this is an initiative between Head Start and Intuit circles, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about Intuit supporting startups and Intuit supporting other platforms. So, if you could take it.
Yeah, sure. So I think so. As Intuit's mission is to power prosperity, I think one of the things that we started to do was power prosperity for startups. Who better to do that than for startups who are a very close to our heart, because these are those who dare to dream and create something for all of us. And what we have done is we've essentially done a free product-led growth community, which essentially brings the startup ecosystem and the influencers together, such that you can network and engage. So the idea there is to start a conversation, to be able to connect directly with different influencers of the ecosystem. These can be either startup accelerators, incubators, investors, and also like how you and I are talking now, essentially being able to create best practices for them, as well as being able to collaborate in terms of integrating their app with QuickBooks as like a third-party developer, and add value to the ecosystem of products that we sell to our customers. And that's essentially the vision. And we have over, I think, 2,500 startups who are signed up in this program. And this is a very active community, and we're constantly engaging with the entrepreneurs, and also partnering with them to do integrations.
We just had the Opfin founder. They got acquired by Razorpay recently, and they were mentioning about it being this was the founder of Opfin, and this is his words. He said, "I would give the APIs an 8 on 10 in terms of its ease of being able to integrate with their startup." So I don't know how picky or choosy he is with his numbers, but I think coming close to a perfect score is a great response from your community already.
Yeah,
So
that's very happy to know. I think we usually focus a lot on how products look. I think we have started to now focus more on how APIs start to look, because with business integrations that becomes more critical.
right. So I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today.
Thank you.
On closing, if you have any last thoughts, and
No, I think this is a great initiative, and really nice speaking to you, Kiran, as well. And I hope this was useful. And I wish all the startup entrepreneurs, um, this is a hard journey, and I wish you all not just luck but the very best. And but it is a great adventure, and you are on a very bold journey to realize what very few of us try to do, and more power to you. Thanks.
thank you, thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.